In law, death is supposed to be absolute. Once a person is declared dead, the system moves forward without them. Bank accounts close. Legal identity ends. Property transfers. Files are sealed. There is no provision for error. And yet across police records, court transcripts, hospital archives, and prison logs, there are cases where people were officially declared dead, only to later reappear. Not as ghosts, not as imposters, but alive. And when they did, the system didn't correct itself. It buried them again. Let's start with the case that exposed how fragile death really is on paper. In 2014, Victor Hale was declared dead following a house fire in Manchester. The remains recovered from the property were severely burned, but dental records were considered a match. The coroner signed off. A death certificate was issued. Victor Hale legally ceased to exist. 6 months later, his name appeared on a court witness list. At first, officials assumed it was a clerical error, an old record pulled into a new case. But when the witness arrived, the situation changed immediately. The man identified himself as Victor Hale. He provided correct personal details. His fingerprints matched archived records. His voice matched older recordings. Most unsettling of all, he had no burn injuries, no scars, no memory of the fire. Victor claimed he wasn't even home that night. The court recessed. Officials removed him from the building. The transcript from that session was sealed. The case number was reassigned. Victor Hale was never officially reclassified as alive. To this day, he remains legally deceased. Then, there's the motorway autopsy case from 2019. A man was declared dead at the scene of a collision on the M25. The coroner conducted a full post-mortem. Cause of death: blunt force trauma. Internal injuries were documented in detail. Hours later, the same man walked into a nearby hospital, alive, with minor injuries and valid identification. Staff initially thought it was a mistake. It wasn't. The autopsy report described internal conditions that could only be known if the body had been opened. When questioned, the coroner gave no explanation and resigned within the week. The report was reclassified. The man was discharged without follow-up. His legal status was changed from deceased to administratively unresolved. No further record of him exists. And these cases don't stop with accidents. They appear inside the prison system too. In the late 1990s, a newly opened prison wing included a cell already listed as occupied, Cell B-17. The assigned inmate name didn't correspond to any current prisoner. Guards assumed it was an old entry that hadn't been cleared, but officers reported hearing movement inside the cell: footsteps, coughing, scratching, even though it remained locked. When the cell was finally opened, it showed signs of long-term use: worn bedding, scratched concrete, a name carved repeatedly into the wall. That name later matched a man convicted 10 years after the cell was first logged as occupied. During sentencing, the man reportedly said one sentence over and over: "I've already done this time." Cell B-17 was sealed. It no longer appears on blueprints. The man died in custody 3 years later. And then there are the burial errors, the ones that shouldn't be possible. In Eastern Europe, a woman was pronounced dead after a stroke and buried within 48 hours. Days later, residents near the cemetery reported hearing noises at night. Authorities dismissed it until a groundskeeper noticed disturbed soil. When the grave was opened, the coffin lid was splintered from the inside. The woman's body showed signs of movement: broken fingers, bloodied hands. Official cause of death was never amended. The report concluded she died during burial process, without specifying how. In multiple countries, similar cases exist: death certificates issued, funerals completed, and later evidence suggesting the person was alive after being declared dead. And here's where the pattern becomes clear. In every case, the system does not admit error. It does something else. It isolates the anomaly. Witnesses are silenced. Records are sealed. Terminology changes. People are reclassified into administrative limbo, neither alive nor dead, in a way that requires explanation. Even hospitals aren't immune. Doctors have reported patients waking up in morgues, being transferred back to wards, only to have their records disappear entirely days later. One nurse described being instructed never to discuss a patient who returned after being declared deceased. The patient's bed was removed, the room number reassigned. It was as if the patient never existed. Some researchers argue these are extreme cases of bureaucratic failure, systems built so rigidly that when something breaks, it cannot adapt. Others suggest something more unsettling, that death in modern systems is not biological, it's administrative. Once paperwork moves faster than reality, reality is expected to comply. And then there's the theory no official body will ever acknowledge that some people don't come back wrong, they come back early. That death certificates, autopsies, prison records, and evidence logs aren't always documenting the past, but something ahead of it. This theory gained traction after an evidence locker audit uncovered sealed bags dated years into the future. Inside were complete case files, suspects, locations, outcomes. One officer found his own name listed as the arresting officer in a murder that hadn't happened yet. Weeks later, the crime occurred exactly as described. The locker was emptied overnight. Surveillance showed no one entering. Officials claimed the files were training materials. No department accepted responsibility. What connects all these cases isn't the paranormal. It's systems, legal systems, medical systems, carceral systems, structures designed to define reality. And when those systems decide someone is dead, even prematurely, correcting that decision becomes almost impossible. Because admitting error would mean admitting the system itself is flawed. And systems don't do that. They erase the exception. So the next time you hear that someone was officially declared dead, remember, that phrase doesn't describe a biological fact. It describes a decision. And sometimes reality doesn't agree. Follow for part 2.